Imagine getting fined $650 for giving away free water during a 115-degree Arizona summer. Now imagine, the woman who fined you didn't realize you'd been recording every word she said for 6 months. This is my story. I'm a widowed electrical engineer who turned a cooler of bottled water into a legal war. A $47,000 legal war, to be exact. What started as a quiet act of kindness, in memory of my late wife, became something I never expected. It exposed HOA corruption I didn't even know existed. It went viral, in ways I never planned for. And it all led to one communications director's spectacular downfall, live-streamed to 340,000 people who watched her lose everything, in real time. By the end, I didn't just beat the HOA, I dismantled it. Let me rewind, to where it all began. Back when I thought putting out one cooler, one hand-painted sign, and a few bottles of ice-cold water would be the simplest thing in the world. I had no idea I was about to meet a very angry woman named Renee Harper, who would turn my entire summer into a battlefield. Canyon Ridge HOA wasn't always a battlefield. For the first 2 years after my wife Sarah died, it was just a place where I lived, raised my daughter Emma, and tried to keep my head above water. The neighbors waved when I mowed the lawn. The monthly meetings droned on about sprinkler schedules and paint colors. Nobody bothered me, and I bothered nobody. But in the summer of 2024, a plastic cooler full of ice and bottled water would become the most controversial object in Arizona, and I would become the neighborhood's most wanted criminal. All because I decided to do something decent. It started on a Tuesday in early June, when the temperature hit 113 degrees before noon. I was standing in my garage, staring at the cooler I'd bought 2 summers earlier for a camping trip Emma and I never took. Sarah had died 3 weeks before we were supposed to leave, and the cooler had been collecting dust ever since. I don't know what made me think of it that morning. Maybe it was watching the UPS driver sprint from his truck to my porch, sweat pouring down his face like he'd just run a marathon. Maybe it was remembering how Sarah had once told Emma that the world would be a better place if people just helped each other more. Or maybe I was just tired of feeling useless. I filled the cooler with ice and 2 cases of bottled water, dragged it to the end of my driveway, and propped up a hand-painted wooden sign I'd made in about 15 minutes. Free water, stay hydrated, in memory of Sarah Ward. It wasn't fancy. The letters were crooked and the wood was scrap from my garage, but it felt right. I went back inside, made Emma breakfast, and forgot about it until that same UPS driver knocked on my door 3 hours later to thank me. He said I might have just saved his life, which seemed dramatic, but his face was still red, and his hands were shaking slightly when he held the cold bottle. I told him to take 2 more for his route. The first week was perfect. Neighbors stopped by to tell me it was a wonderful idea. Trav Kowalski, the carpenter who lived 4 houses down and had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before settling in Arizona, clapped me on the shoulder and said I was a good man. Dog walkers waved. Delivery drivers honked. Even the county sheriff's deputy who patrolled our area pulled over one afternoon, grabbed a bottle, and told me the world needed more people like me. Emma came home from her summer camp every day and asked how many people had taken water. I started keeping a tally on a notepad, just to make her smile. By day 7, we'd given away 230 bottles. On day 14, I found an envelope in my mailbox. It was thin, official-looking, and had the Canyon Ridge HOA logo printed in the corner. I opened it standing right there on my driveway, expecting maybe a newsletter or a reminder about trash pickup days. Instead, I found a notice of violation and a fine for $25. The violation was listed as unauthorized commercial activity visible from street. I read it 3 times, trying to make sense of the words. Commercial activity. I wasn't selling anything. The water was free. The sign said free. I hadn't asked for a single dollar from anyone. I called the HOA office that afternoon, and a woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was crisp and professional, the kind of tone that made it clear she'd rather be doing anything else. I explained the situation as calmly as I could. I told her the water was free, that I was just trying to help people stay safe in the heat, that my late wife would have wanted this. There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough that I thought maybe she was reconsidering. Then she said, "Rules are rules, Mr. Ward. If we let one person put a cooler out, next thing you know, everyone will have lemonade stands and garage sales every weekend. Chaos." Her name, she told me when I asked, was Renee Harper. She was the HOA communications director. She said if I had any further questions, I could attend the next board meeting. But the fine stood. I paid the $25 that same day, writing a check at my kitchen table while Emma did her homework across from me. She asked why I had to pay money for being nice, and I didn't have a good answer. I told her that sometimes rules don't make sense, but we follow them anyway because it's easier than fighting. She looked at me with those serious 9-year-old eyes and said that didn't sound like something Mom would say. She was right. Sarah would have laughed at a $25 fine and doubled the number of coolers. But Sarah wasn't here anymore, and I was tired. I thought paying the fine would make it go away. I had no idea Renee Harper had just added my name to a list. I had no idea that list was about to get very, very long. Chapter 2. The Fine Collector's Obsession. Most people would have stopped after one fine. Pack up the cooler, take down the sign, move on with life. That's what Renee Harper expected, I'm sure. That's what any reasonable person would do when faced with the almighty power of an HOA violation notice. But here's the thing about losing your wife to cancer when you're 36 years old and suddenly raising a daughter alone. You stop caring about a lot of small things, and you start caring fiercely about the few things that still matter. That cooler mattered. It was the first thing I'd done in 2 years that felt like I was honoring Sarah instead of just surviving without her. So I filled it again. Same spot, same sign, same ice-cold bottles sweating in the Arizona sun. Emma helped me carry it out that Sunday morning, and when she asked if I was scared of getting in trouble again, I told her no. I told her we weren't breaking any actual laws, just some busybody's idea of what a neighborhood should look like. She seemed satisfied with that answer. I wasn't sure I was, but I kept the cooler there anyway. 3 weeks later, another envelope appeared. This time, the fine was $50. The violation read unapproved signage creating a visual disruption to community aesthetic standards. I stood in my driveway holding that paper, reading the words over and over until they stopped making sense. Visual disruption. It was a piece of wood with words painted on it. Half the houses on our street had garden gnomes and flamingo lawn ornaments. But apparently my dead wife's memorial was the aesthetic problem. I didn't call Renee this time. I just paid the $50 and kept the cooler exactly where it was. The fines kept coming like clockwork. Week 5 brought a $100 notice for repeat violation of a previously cited offense. Week 7 added another $150 for creating a public nuisance and encouraging loitering. I wasn't even sure who was supposedly loitering. The UPS driver who grabbed water in under 10 seconds. The elderly woman who walked her corgi past my house every morning. By the end of August, I'd paid $325 in fines, and Renee Harper had become a name I heard in my sleep. She'd also become very active on the Canyon Ridge HOA Facebook group, which I'd joined years ago and promptly forgotten about until Trav sent me a screenshot one evening. It was a photo of my cooler, taken from an angle that made it look bigger and more obtrusive than it actually was. The caption read, "Some residents think they can ignore rules because they're doing good. Not on my watch. Eyesore. Unprofessional." The comments were split. A few people agreed with her, using words like property values and community standards. But more people than I expected pushed back, asking what was wrong with free water, pointing out that nobody complained about the Magruder's inflatable Christmas decorations that stayed up until March. Trav showed up at my door that night with 2 beers and some advice. He was the kind of guy who'd seen enough real problems in Kandahar to know when someone was manufacturing fake ones at home. He told me Renee was the type who got off on tiny amounts of power, and the only way to deal with people like that was to document everything. Record every interaction, save every email, keep every receipt. He said it like he was briefing me for a mission, and maybe he was. I thanked him for the beer and the advice, but I didn't think I'd need it. I was wrong. On August 15th, Renee came to my house in person. I was in the garage organizing electrical supplies when I heard heels clicking up my driveway. She was shorter than I'd imagined, maybe 5'3", with blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful and sunglasses that probably cost more than my monthly water bill. She didn't introduce herself. She just pointed at the cooler and said the next fine would be $300. And did I really want to keep playing hero? I told her I was just giving away water. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something sharp and expensive, and said, "You're making me look bad in my own neighborhood. Not that you're breaking rules or you're violating policy. You're making me look bad." That's when I understood this had never been about rules at all. I'd bought a Ring doorbell camera 2 weeks earlier, mostly because Emma had been asking for one after a school presentation about home safety. I'd also ordered a small audio recorder from Amazon, the kind reporters use, just in case Trav was right about documentation. Both were running when Renee made her little speech. Both caught every word. I didn't tell her that. I just nodded and said I'd think about it. And she walked back to her white Mercedes SUV parked at the curb, like she'd just won something. That night, I found an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a $100 bill and a note written in shaky handwriting. "Keep the water coming. We see what she's doing." It wasn't signed. I never found out who sent it. But I kept that note in my wallet. And I kept the cooler right where it was. By September, I'd paid $650 in fines. But I also had 47 hours of recordings. And Renee Harper had absolutely no idea she was being watched. In 2024, wars aren't fought with swords or guns. They're fought with Ring doorbells, Facebook posts, and one very tired electrician who just learned how to use Reddit. I'd never been much for social media before Sarah died. She was the one who posted photos of Emma's soccer games and shared recipes she'd never actually cook. After she passed, I let all our accounts sit dormant. Digital graveyards I couldn't bring myself to delete or update. But on a Thursday night in early September, sitting at my kitchen table with $650 in paid fines and nowhere else to turn, I created a throwaway Reddit account and found a community that would change everything. The subreddit was called Fuck HOA, and if you've never visited it, imagine thousands of people sharing their most absurd, infuriating, and sometimes hilarious stories about homeowners associations gone rogue. I spent an hour reading posts about fines for the wrong shade of beige paint, threats over basketball hoops, and one particularly insane story about a woman who got cited for having too many flowers in her garden. My story fit right in. I wrote it out in maybe 20 minutes. No fancy editing, just the facts. Fined $650 for giving free water in 115-degree heat. My HOA says it's commercial activity. Added a photo of the fine notices and my handmade sign. Posted it just before midnight and went to bed expecting nothing. I woke up to 4,000 upvotes and 300 comments. By lunch, it had hit 23,000 upvotes and been cross-posted to a dozen other communities. People were furious on my behalf, which felt strange and validating and slightly overwhelming all at once. They called Renee every name you can imagine, and several I'd never heard before. They shared their own HOA horror stories. Some offered legal advice, most of it probably terrible, but a few comments stood out as genuinely useful. One person linked Arizona's HOA laws and pointed out that charitable activity wasn't mentioned anywhere in the statutes. Another suggested I contact local media by Friday afternoon. A reporter from the Arizona Republic had emailed me asking for an interview. The article ran on Sunday. It was fair, factual, and made Renee sound exactly as petty as she was without the reporter ever saying it outright. They quoted the HOA bylaws, interviewed 2 of my neighbors who supported the water station, and included a statement from Renee that was somehow worse than silence. She'd told them I was seeking attention and playing victim, that rules existed for a reason, and that she had a responsibility to maintain community standards. The Phoenix New Times picked it up Monday with a more sarcastic headline. Local HOA Karen declares war on free water. The story started spreading beyond Arizona. Renee's counterattack came Tuesday evening in the form of a Facebook livestream. I didn't watch it in real time, but Trav sent me the link within minutes of it ending, and I watched the whole 13-minute disaster on my phone while Emma practiced piano in the next room. Renee sat in what looked like a home office, her face perfectly made up, her tone calm and reasonable in that way that immediately tells you someone is absolutely losing their mind internally. She said she wanted to set the record straight about certain allegations being made by a resident who refused to follow simple community guidelines. She claimed I was violating multiple HOA covenants, not just one. She suggested I had ulterior motives, though she never specified what those might be. She said the media was sensationalizing the story, and that people on the internet didn't understand how HOAs actually worked. The comments on her live stream were brutal. Out of maybe 200 comments, I counted 11 that supported her. The rest ranged from mocking to genuinely angry. Several people pointed out that free water wasn't a violation of anything except her ego. Someone made a meme of her face with the caption, HOA Karen Starter Pack. It was mean. It was also kind of accurate. The video got shared 48 times before she made it private, but by then screenshots were everywhere. That same week, I received an email that would change the trajectory of everything. The sender was Denise Wu, an attorney with the ACLU of Arizona. She'd read about my situation and thought it might constitute a First Amendment case. Free water, she explained, could be considered expressive conduct, a form of speech protected by the Constitution. She said if I was interested, her organization might be willing to represent me pro bono, meaning free of charge. I read that email 5 times before I believed it was real. I called her the same day. Denise was sharp, direct, and refreshingly honest. She told me we might not win, but we had a solid argument. She said HOAs overstepped their authority constantly and rarely got challenged because most people couldn't afford lawyers. She said my case could set a precedent. I told her I just wanted to put water out for people who needed it, without being harassed. She laughed and said that was exactly why this case mattered. I have a lawyer now. I had evidence. I had public support and media attention. What I didn't have was any idea that Renee Harper's next move would involve the police and a lie so bold, even I didn't see it coming. When social media didn't work, Renee Harper did what cornered Karens do best. She called the cops. And she didn't just call them to complain or ask questions. She told them I was threatening residents, creating a hostile environment, and stalking board members. The problem with lies that big is they eventually collide with reality. The bigger problem for Renee was that reality had timestamps, GPS data, and a very detailed alibi. I was making breakfast for Emma on a Wednesday morning in early October when 2 police officers knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting them, obviously, and my first thought when I saw the uniforms through the window was that something had happened to my mother, or maybe there'd been a break in somewhere on the street. I opened the door still holding a spatula with scrambled eggs stuck to it, and the older of the 2 officers, a guy named Ramirez with tired eyes and a wedding ring that looked like it had seen better days, asked if I was Logan Ward. I said yes. He asked if we could talk for a minute. I invited them in, turned off the stove, and told Emma to finish her breakfast in the living room. Officer Ramirez was professional and calm, the kind of cop who'd done this job long enough to know when something didn't smell right. He said they'd received a report that I'd been harassing HOA officials and making residents feel unsafe. He asked if I knew anything about that. I genuinely laughed, not because it was funny, but because the accusation was so absurd I couldn't process it any other way. I told him I'd put out free water and paid a bunch of fines, but I hadn't harassed anyone. His partner, a younger officer whose name tag read Chen, asked if they could see the water station. I took them outside and showed them the cooler, the sign, and the Ring camera mounted above my garage door. Ramirez looked at the setup for maybe 10 seconds before glancing at Chen with an expression that said, "We drove out here for this." They asked a few more questions. Had I contacted any board members directly? None. Except for one phone call back in June. Had I approached anyone's home? No. Had I made any threats? Implied or otherwise, absolutely not. Ramirez wrote some notes, thanked me for my time, and said they didn't see any evidence of harassment. He told me to be careful, because HOA disputes could escalate quickly, and sometimes people made poor decisions when they felt backed into corners. I asked who had filed the report. He said he couldn't tell me that, but his eyes flicked down to his notepad, where I could clearly see the name Renee Harper written in blue ink. He left his card and told me to call if I had any problems. I thanked him and closed the door, then immediately pulled up my Ring camera app to make sure the entire conversation had been recorded. It had. Emma asked me what the police wanted. I told her it was just a misunderstanding, that someone had made a mistake, but everything was fine. She looked at me the way only a 9-year-old who's already lost one parent can look at you, like she was calculating exactly how much danger we were in and whether I was lying to protect her. I promised her we were safe. She went back to her breakfast, but I could tell she didn't believe me. I requested a copy of the police report that afternoon. It took 3 days to arrive. But when it did, I sat in my car in the parking lot of the records office and read every word twice. The report stated that on October 9th at approximately 2:15 p.m., Renee Harper had called to report that a resident named Logan Ward was creating a hostile environment, had been seen repeatedly outside board members' homes, and was stalking her specifically. She'd told the police she feared for her safety. The report noted that officers had investigated and found no evidence to support the claims. It also noted that Ms. Harper had been advised to stop filing frivolous reports. October 9th, 2:15 p.m. I pulled out my phone and scrolled back through my calendar. On October 9th at 2:15 p.m., I had been 42 miles away at Emma's dentist appointment in Scottsdale. I had the appointment confirmation email, the timestamp from the dental office's check-in system, and GPS data from my phone that tracked my location throughout the day. I'd even stopped for gas on the way home and had a receipt with a timestamp of 3:07 p.m. from a station 30 miles from my house. There was no possible way I could have been stalking Renee Harper because I hadn't been anywhere near Canyon Ridge. I sent everything to Denise Wu. She called me back within an hour and used a word I'd never heard her use before. Jackpot. She said filing a false police report was a crime in Arizona, and if we could prove I wasn't where Renee said I was, which we absolutely could, we had grounds for a countersuit, defamation, filing a false report, harassment. She said Renee had just handed us enough ammunition to blow her entire case apart. That same week, something unexpected happened. Trav knocked on my door with an idea. He'd been talking to neighbors, the ones who were sick of Renee's power trips and arbitrary fines, and he'd convinced 11 of them to do something bold. The following Wednesday, every single one of them put out their own water coolers. Same setup, same free water, same hand-painted signs. Trav called it Water Cooler Wednesday. Renee responded by sending 12 identical fine notices in the mail, $25 each, for unauthorized charitable distribution. The Phoenix New Times ran another article with a photo of our street. The headline read, "HOA war escalates as neighborhood fights back with ICE." In the photo, you could see all 12 coolers lined up along Saguaro Lane like tiny rebellions. Renee was losing control, and she knew it. What she didn't know yet was that I had 47 hours of recordings, a false police report with a bulletproof alibi, and a lawyer who was just getting started. October in Arizona means the heat finally breaks. Temperatures drop from unbearable to merely oppressive, and people start pretending summer is over even though it's still 85 degrees at sunset. For me, October meant watching Renee Harper get increasingly desperate, and desperation makes people sloppy. What I didn't expect was just how sloppy she'd get, or that my 9-year-old daughter would be the one to catch her in a lie so big it would involve county officials and potential felony charges. The notice arrived on a Thursday, tucked into my mailbox between a grocery store flyer and a credit card offer. It looked official, printed on heavy cream-colored paper with an embossed seal at the top that read, Maricopa County Health Department. The letter stated that a code enforcement inspection had been conducted on my property and that my water cooler violated county health codes regarding public food distribution. It demanded I remove the cooler within 48 hours or face a fine of $500. It was signed by someone named J. Patterson, county health inspector, and included a case number and a phone number to call with questions. Something about it felt wrong immediately. The seal looked slightly off, like it had been scanned and reprinted. The language was too formal in some places and too casual in others. I called the main Maricopa County Health Department number. The woman who answered was friendly and efficient. I gave her the case number. 3 minutes of hold music later, she told me they had no record of that case number. When I asked about J. Patterson, her tone shifted from friendly to concerned. No employee by that name, current or former. She asked me to email her a copy because impersonating a county official was a serious crime. Emma got home from school around 3:30, dumped her backpack on the kitchen table, and asked what I was doing hunched over my laptop, looking angry. I showed her the letter and explained that someone had sent me a fake inspection notice. She read it carefully, face scrunched in concentration. "Who's J. Patterson?" I said. "Probably just a made-up name." She asked if I could Google it with Renee Harper's name. I stared at my daughter for a long moment, wondering when exactly she'd become smarter than me. I typed J. Patterson, Renee Harper into the search bar. The third result was a Facebook profile for Jason Patterson, married to Renee Harper, employed as an IT specialist at a medical billing company. His profile picture showed him and Renee on a beach somewhere, both holding cocktails with little umbrellas. I clicked through his work history. IT specialist, systems administrator. Nothing remotely related to health inspections or county work. I called Denise Wu immediately. She listened without interrupting. And when I finished, there was a long pause. Holy shit. Logan. She told me to send everything. If Renee or her husband had forged a government document, that was a crime that carried actual jail time. She'd contact the county attorney's office immediately. The story broke 48 hours later. The Arizona Republic ran it with the headline, HOA official accused of forging county inspection notice. The article detailed everything. Renee issued a statement claiming she did not know any forged documents. The problem was that the return address on the envelope was the HOA office, and the paper matched the exact stock used for all official HOA correspondence. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday, and word spread it was going to be standing room only. Trav had been collecting signatures for a petition demanding Renee's resignation. By Monday night, he had 117 names. The meeting was held in the community center. Every seat was filled. People lined the walls and spilled into the parking lot. I sat in the third row with Emma on one side and Trav on the other. Renee showed up late, her face tight and her movements jerky. When the resident comments began, Trav stood and read the petition. Renee Harper has abused her power, harassed residents, and allegedly committed fraud. We demand her immediate removal from all HOA positions. The room erupted in applause. Renee stood, hands shaking, and pulled out her phone. She started a Facebook live stream right there. You people are ungrateful. I volunteer my hours for this community, hours of my personal time, and this is how you repay me. The comments flooded in. Resign. You're a bully. Logan for president. She read them out loud, face turning red, then screamed something incoherent and stormed out. Brett Caldwell, the HOA president who'd been silent through all of this, Finally announced they'd be conducting an internal review of Renee's conduct. Too little. Too late. Someone shouted. The meeting ended with nothing resolved, except that everyone now knew exactly who Renee Harper was. I went home, put Emma to bed, and sat on my back patio drinking a beer and staring at the desert sky. Renee was unraveling. The county was investigating. The HOA board was fractured. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. I had no idea that Renee had one last move left, or that it would drag all of us into a courtroom where everything would finally come to a head. November in Arizona means perfect weather, the kind of bright blue sky mornings that make you forget summer ever tried to kill you. But I barely noticed the weather on the day I walked into Maricopa County Superior Court, wearing the only suit I owned, the same one I'd worn to Sarah's funeral 2 years earlier. The HOA had filed a lawsuit against me for defamation and damaging their reputation, demanding $25,000 in damages, plus a court order forcing me to remove all social media posts and public statements. I'd countersued for $50,000, citing harassment, defamation, fraud, and emotional distress. Denise Wu walked beside me carrying 2 accordion folders stuffed with evidence, and she looked calm in that way lawyers do when they know they're holding all the cards. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, wood-paneled and fluorescent lit, with maybe 40 seats for observers. Half of them were filled with people from Canyon Ridge. Trav sat in the front row wearing a button-up shirt that looked like it was strangling him. Emma was with my mother for the day because Denise thought a 9-year-old didn't need to see this, and I agreed. Brett Caldwell sat on the other side of the aisle, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Renee sat at the plaintiff's table with the HOA's lawyer, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than my car. Renee wore a navy dress and pearl earrings, playing the part of the reasonable professional being victimized by an unstable resident. She didn't look at me once. Judge Patricia Moreno entered at 9 a.m. sharp. She was in her late 50s, with dark hair pulled into a bun and reading glasses that sat on the edge of her nose. Denise had told me Judge Moreno had a reputation for being no-nonsense and deeply impatient with frivolous cases. The HOA's lawyer stood and began his opening statement. He painted me as a troublemaker who'd ignored repeated warnings, violated clear HOA rules, and then launched a vicious online campaign to defame his clients when he didn't get his way. He showed screenshots of my Reddit post and the Arizona Republic articles. He claimed the HOA had suffered reputational harm and that board members had received threatening messages because of my actions. He never mentioned the water was free. He never mentioned the heat. He made it sound like I'd declared war over a parking dispute. Judge Moreno listened without expression, occasionally writing notes, when the HOA lawyer finished. She looked at Denise and said, "Counsel, I hope you have something more compelling than what I just heard." Denise stood, buttoned her blazer, and smiled. "Your Honor, what you just heard was a carefully edited version of events. Let me show you what actually happened." She opened the first folder and began laying out the timeline. The initial $25 fine for free water during record heat. The escalating fines with increasingly vague justifications. The Facebook posts by Renee Harper targeting me specifically. The false police report filed on October 9th when I was 42 miles away, with GPS and dental records to prove it. The forged county inspection letter was signed by Jay Patterson, who happened to be married to Ms. Harper and was not a county employee. Denise played the Ring camera footage of Renee at my house in August. The audio was crystal clear. "You're making me look bad in my own neighborhood." Judge Moreno's eyebrows went up slightly. Denise played the recording of the HOA meeting where the bylaw vote was conducted improperly, needing 2/3 majority but only receiving 4 of 7 votes. She presented the email from Maricopa County confirming no such inspector existed. She showed Facebook screenshots of Renee's livestream meltdown. The evidence kept coming, piece after piece, each one another nail in a coffin that was already sealed shut. The HOA lawyer objected twice, both times overruled. Judge Moreno asked if Ms. Harper would be testifying. The lawyer said yes. Renee took the stand looking composed but pale. Denise began her cross-examination gently, almost friendly. Ms. Harper, how long have you served as communications director? 3 years. And in that time, how many fines have you issued for charitable water distribution? Just to Mr. Ward. Why is that? Because his violated multiple provisions. Which provisions specifically? Renee hesitated. Visual disruption, commercial activity, unapproved signage. But the water was free. Correct, yes. But the intent was commercial. How is free water commercial? Renee's jaw tightened. It set a precedent. Denise let that answer hang in the air, then shifted. Ms. Harper, did you file a police report on October 9th claiming Mr. Ward was stalking you? I felt unsafe. Were you aware Mr. Ward was 42 miles away at a dental appointment when you made that call? I must have been mistaken about the date. Mistaken, or lying. The HOA lawyer objected. Judge Moreno overruled. Answer the question. Ms. Harper. Renee's hands gripped the edge of the witness box. I was under a lot of stress. Did you or your husband create a fake county inspection notice? No. Are you aware your husband's name is Jay Patterson, and he works in IT, not health inspections? That's a coincidence. Denise held up the forged letter. This was printed on HOA letterhead. From the HOA office. You're the communications director. Who else had access? Renee's face crumbled. She started crying. Not delicate tears, but choking sobs. I was trying to protect the community. From free water, from chaos. Judge Moreno removed her glasses. Ms. Harper, I'm referring this matter to the county attorney for potential criminal charges. The courtroom went silent. Brett Caldwell stood suddenly. Your Honor, the board would like to drop our lawsuit. We're also removing Ms. Harper from all positions effective immediately. Renee screamed, You cowards! And fled the courtroom. Judge Moreno waited until the door slammed, then looked at me. Case dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Ward, your countersuit is granted. The HOA will pay $12,000 in damages plus all legal fees. And Mr. Ward, keep that cooler out there. Arizona needs more people like you. The courtroom erupted. People clapped. Trav whistled. Someone live-streamed the whole thing. And later Denise told me 340,000 people had watched. I just sat there feeling like I'd run a marathon I never signed up for. It was over. Renee was gone. And somehow, impossibly, I'd won. Winning in court felt surreal. Like someone had cut the strings holding me underwater, and I'd finally surfaced gasping for air I didn't realize I'd been missing. But for me, real victory wasn't about $12,000 or watching Renee Harper's career implode in front of a judge. It was about what happened in the months after, when one cooler of water turned into something bigger than I'd ever imagined possible. Sarah would have loved it. Emma definitely did. December brought the kind of mild Arizona winter that makes people from back east irrationally angry. 70 degrees and sunny, while the rest of the country froze. The check from the HOA arrived 2 weeks after the verdict, along with a formal apology letter signed by Brett Caldwell and the newly elected board. The apology was stiff and corporate, the kind written by lawyers to avoid admitting any real wrongdoing. But I didn't care. I deposited the check, paid Denise's firm their costs even though she'd worked pro bono, and donated the rest to a local homeless shelter. Trav had been elected HOA president in an emergency vote, running on what he called a common sense platform. His first official act was to amend the bylaws to explicitly allow charitable activities on private property. The vote passed 7-0. Nobody objected. Funny how that works when the tyrant leaves the room. Renee's fate played out exactly as you'd expect. She pleaded guilty to filing a false police report in exchange for the forgery charge being dropped. $1,500 fine, 40 hours of community service, and a misdemeanor on her record. She moved out of Canyon Ridge in January, and the last I heard, she was working part-time at a craft store in Tempe. I didn't feel triumphant about that. I just felt tired. Emma asked me once if I was glad Renee got in trouble, and I told her the truth. I was glad she couldn't hurt anyone else, but I wasn't glad she threw her whole life away over a cooler of water. Emma thought about that for a while, then said Mom would have said the same thing. She was right. The real story started in late December when Emma came home from school with an idea that would change everything. We were sitting at the kitchen table doing homework when she looked up and said, "Dad, what if other neighborhoods had coolers too? Not just ours. Like, all over Phoenix." I asked her what she meant. She said there were probably lots of people who needed water in summer. Construction workers and homeless people and kids walking to school. And if we could put out one cooler, why couldn't we put out 50? I stared at my daughter and realized she'd inherited her mother's heart and her father's stubborn refusal to accept the world as it was. I started a nonprofit in January, called it Sarah's Stations, in memory of the woman who'd started all of this without ever knowing it. The mission was simple: free water stations across Phoenix during summer months, maintained by volunteers, funded by donations, and completely free for anyone who needed it. I set up a GoFundMe expecting maybe a few $1,000s from friends and family. The story had gone viral enough that by February we'd raised $180,000 from strangers across the country who'd followed the HOA saga and wanted to help. People sent $5, $50, a few sent $1,000. Every donation came with a message. Stick it to the HOAs. For Sarah. Because kindness matters. I read every single one. Summer 2025 was brutal, with temperatures hitting 118 degrees in July. But it was also beautiful in ways I hadn't expected. We installed 47 Sarah's stations across Phoenix. Bright blue coolers with logos designed by Emma showing a water bottle and the words, "Stay hydrated, stay kind." I trained volunteers, partnered with Costco and local Starbucks locations for water donations, and spent weekends driving around the city making sure every station was stocked. Trav helped. My mother helped. Even Brett Caldwell showed up one Saturday to install a station in his church parking lot. Looking sheepish but determined to make amends. The local news covered it. The Arizona Republic did a follow-up feature. The Phoenix New-Times called it the HOA war that started a movement. But the moment that mattered most came in July when I received an email from the office of Governor Katie Hobbs. They wanted to invite me to the state capitol to receive the Arizona Humanitarian Award for community service. I read that email 5 times before calling Emma into the room to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. She screamed loud enough that the neighbors probably heard. We drove to Phoenix on a Tuesday morning. Emma wearing her favorite dress and clutching a framed photo of Sarah. Governor Hobbs met us in her office, shook my hand, and told me that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness spark the biggest changes. The award ceremony was brief and formal, with a plaque and a speech I barely heard because I was too busy trying not to cry. Emma held Sarah's photo the entire time. When it was over, the governor knelt down to Emma's level and said, "Your mom would be so proud of both of you." Emma nodded and said, "I know. She's probably watching." We drove home as the sun set over the desert, turning the sky orange and purple and gold. Emma asked if we could stop by the house and check on our cooler, the original one, station number 1. We pulled up to find a little boy, maybe 8 years old, grabbing a bottle of water while his mom waited on the sidewalk. The kid looked at the sign, read it carefully, then turned to me as I got out of the car. "Are you Mr. Ward?" I said yes. He grinned. "I want to start a station at my school. Can you show me how I looked at Emma?" She was already pulling the instruction manual out of her backpack, the one we'd printed for volunteers. I crouched down next to the kid and said, "Let me show you. It's easier than you think." And as we stood there in the driveway talking about coolers and ice and kindness, I realized this was what Sarah had meant all those years ago when she told Emma the world would be better if people just helped each other more. She'd been right. She was always right. 6 months later, Denise Wu published an op-ed in the New York Times titled "Why Small Battles Matter," using my case as an example of how ordinary people could push back against institutional overreach. The article went viral. Within a year, over 300 neighborhoods across the country had started their own free water programs, many of them naming their stations after loved ones they'd lost. My Reddit post from that desperate night in September became the top-rated post of all time on Fuck HOA. A strange badge of honor I never expected. Someone even made a documentary about the whole saga, though I declined to participate. I'd said everything I needed to say. I didn't set out to become a hero or start a movement. I just wanted to honor my wife and help people stay hydrated in a desert that kills the unprepared. But sometimes doing the right thing means standing up to bullies, even when they fine you $650 and call the cops and forge documents and drag you into court. Especially then, because the world doesn't change when good people stay quiet. It changes when one person says, "Not on my lawn," and means it. That lawn still has a cooler, a hand-painted sign, and a story that proves sometimes the smallest acts of rebellion create the biggest waves. Station number 1, the one that started everything, the one that saved me as much as it saved anyone else. Stay hydrated, stay kind, and never let a Karen tell you charity is against the rules. Logan's story proves that one person can spark a revolution. What injustice have you witnessed that deserves to be told? Drop a comment below, sharing your story, or tell us which moment hit hardest. And if this fired you up, share it with someone who needs to hear that standing up matters. Justice loves company.